Hey, all you awesome Xers out there. It's your old pal Jesse, and welcome to another edition of Gen X Thinks. Today, our topic is one that I've read many times online and actually seen in our comment section quite a few times as well. And I believe that it's important enough to be addressed in a video. So I can't always tell the ages of the people saying this stuff about Gen X being the worst parents in history. I can't talk to that about, which, if it's older people or younger people saying that about us, I don't know. It's a very common sentiment out there outside of Generation X. I do know that. First of all, I'd like to address from the very beginning that the people saying this haven't walked a mile in our shoes. They probably, most likely, raised kids in the 80s. Their young kids were in the 80s, born in the 80s, and they didn't have the internet to worry about. So they could but they did have video games. They had video game consoles. So they could buy a video game console and put the kid in the room. They didn't have to worry about the kid being influenced by outside or anything, the kid watching crazy porn online, any of that stuff. They knew what the kid was doing, playing that video game. No phone in the room, nothing else, no contact with the outside world. The kid was in some fantasy world, and that was it. In my opinion, that's pretty easy parenting, especially when you compare it to the Gen Xers and even the earlier millennials who grew up without internet and didn't really understand what it was at the time, but their kids were born into it, right? So your kid wanted internet as soon as they were old enough to understand and to play games and do all that stuff. Your kid wanted internet. It wasn't very long before any kid without internet was, a social leper, because you couldn't message or get on the message, but whatever the hell they were doing back then. That's saying that someone did a bad job at something. I don't care what it is, but that's like me saying that, I don't know, the engineers that designed the space shuttle were the worst engineers in history. I can say that. That doesn't mean I know what the hell I'm talking about. I've never done it. I've never even been around a space shuttle. I have no idea. So unless you've raised kids in that environment, you have no idea what you're talking about. Period. Most likely, when you were raising kids, you got to throw them out because there weren't even many video game consoles. You just got to throw them outside and slam the door behind them and see them again when the streetlights came on. To me, that's throwing stones in a glass house. And you don't even understand what the other houses are made of. The second point I'd like to make here, the second thing I'd like to point out here, is that Generation X was really the first generation, the first group of people to be hit with this whole thing that women have to enter the workforce. Whether you agree with that or not, that's not the point here. That's not the issue. Everybody has their own ideas about that. If a woman wants to go into the workforce of her own free will, more power to her. Just like a man. If you want to go work. Be my guest. That's Who would want to do that? I don't know. I'm forced to, so it just seems like a crazy idea to me. But hey, I live in America where people have died for your freedom to choose. So if you want to go out and get a job, more power to you. But women in our generation were forced to. They were shamed into it. All right. So it was shameful to want to be a stay at home mom and be supported by a man. But now you can get riled up and say whatever you want about that. But at the same time, they were saying that a man who wanted to stay home was strong and should be celebrated. Now that's just a reverse. They just reversed the crap, because back in the 50s, a woman was supposed to stay home. Then in the 90s, a woman was supposed to go to work, and a man could do whatever he wants. He was celebrated either way. If he wanted to go to work, fine. But now in the 90s, if he wants to stay home, he's celebrated. He's courageous if he wants to stay home, and women don't see this stuff, I guess. Or you do, but you're shamed into silence about it. No, it's perfectly fine for either gender to want to stay home and raise their kids. Perfectly fine. Neither one of them should be strong or celebrated. It's a job just like building a house or splitting atoms or building a space shuttle, whatever. It's a job. It's something that should be done. Raising kids. We shouldn't be celebrated for raising our kids. Women aren't celebrated for raising their kids. Why should men be celebrated for raising their kids? Because they wanted women to be out in the workforce and they knew most men would not. Most men don't want to stay home and raise the kids. Add on top of that the fact that economically women were first forced into the workforce, into the workplace, out of their homes, away from their children, and into the workplace economically. I mean, if they're just what inflation and all that, there was, you couldn't do it anymore. Back in the 50s and stuff, a man could get a job at a factory or something, and or as a welder or whatever, and raise a family, raise 4 or 5 kids, support his wife, buy her nice things, buy her a car, buy a house, all that stuff. You know, a man could do that on his own and allow his wife to stay home and educate and raise their kids with proper values. You could do that. And I'm just talking about the financial aspect of it now. Then you get into the 90s and the economic situation is so horrible, and it's never, that ship has never been righted. It forces both parents into the workplace, so they either have to go to work at the same time and, you know, pay for daycare or whatever, or they, one works day and one works night and then they never see each other. Either way, both people working full-time jobs is hard on a marriage. It's really hard. And then you wonder why divorce rates are skyrocketing or have not. I said it like it's like the 90s or the present. You wonder why divorce rates skyrocketed. Now you add all those things together and you end up with a whole lot of single moms out there working their asses off trying to raise kids. And then I see these ignorant ass people out there calling us the worst parents ever. And when I don't care what they say, honestly. That doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect those hardworking moms out there who did everything they could to provide for their kids. It doesn't affect them. They shouldn't care. You shouldn't care. But when I see bullshit, I'm going to call it out. Anybody saying that's full of shit. We know it. And now, just probably, I'm not going to say everybody, but probably a lot of marriages go through stuff. Like what I just noted was both people in the marriage working full time. That is hard on a marriage. You never get to see each other. And when you start having problems, you don't have time to sit down and work them out and really devote time to them because both of you are working. Both of you are just tired at the end of the day. I mean, what? So that leads to divorce. And I went through that. Me and my wife, we went through some problems and we went to counseling, couples counseling. That sounded like a great idea to me. So we went to couples counseling. First thing they said after we told them what was going on and stuff, the first thing the counselor said was, have you ever thought about divorce? And I'm like, you know, we're here to fix our marriage. If we wanted a divorce, we could go see a lawyer. We'd be sitting in front of a lawyer right now, not a counselor. We're not here for divorce. So we left that one and went on, tried another one, same thing. I really think y'all should consider divorce. What? So we went through like 3 or 4 couples counselors like that, and every one of them suggested divorce. So then we went to separate individual counselors. Same thing. My counselor told me that I should consider divorcing my wife. So I just, no. So we stopped going to counseling. That was a waste of time for what we were going through, because their only solution to the problem was divorce. Where did they get their counseling certificate or whatever, their therapy certificate? I've worked in construction and stuff my whole life, so, and I could have given people that kind of advice. I'll go get a divorce while I'm drinking a beer. So that's the kind of stuff that we're faced with while trying to raise kids in a very quickly changing society of analog to online digital, vast amounts of information, in that changing the world changed more in our lifetime than it has in the history of human civilization. And we're supposed to believe that we were the worst parents in the history of the world. People are actually saying that crap. So, whatever. This is America. They have the right to say that crap, but we have the right to point out that they're full of shit. Another thing is, and it goes along with that, I've heard several people several times say that Generation Z is the worst generation ever. Of course, you would think that if you think that Generation X is comprised of the worst parents ever, right? So Generation Z must be the worst generation ever. But I was watching a podcast there where they went around and did a survey across all the, not all 100%, but across the nation. They surveyed kids in high schools and colleges, and Generation Z is the most conservative generation out there right now. They hold American values. They believe in our nation. They're America first. They're just, they've got their head on their shoulders as the majority of them. So, in my opinion, we've done a damn good job raising kids, if that statistic is true. Since I started this channel, I've just seen a lot of animosity, let's say, a lot of animosity toward Gen X from the other generation. I think about it a lot. I can't help it because it's a confusing conundrum to me and my brain. That's just what when I see something like that, my brain just automatically starts, working it around like a dog on a bone, trying to figure out why. And I haven't figured it out yet, but it is a fact that people from other generations don't like us for some reason. And I look at that and I'm like, I've been in Gen X. I've known Gen Xers my whole life. A lot of the online stuff I do is Gen X centered. So I see a lot of Gen Xers posting stuff online and whatnot. And I do not see a lot of animosity toward boomers, let's say. Gen X doesn't specifically dislike boomers or millennials. We don't get on there and start hacking on millennials, calling them the worst parents ever, or the same thing with the boomers. Why is it the other way? Why do they dislike us so much? What the hell? And I know we haven't done anything to deserve that, so it's them. They have the problem. Think about it. What the hell have we done as a generation? We've done the best we could through life, worked our asses off since we were kids, and like I said in my other video, if you watched it, we're the quiet person in the room. And then somebody looks over and said, "Oh, I'm going to go mess with that guy." That's not the right one to mess with. You're an idiot. Leave the quiet guy alone. If you learned anything in life, leave the quiet guy alone. Having dissected that subject and going into it a little bit deeper and looking at the how difficult it was from every angle to raise a family as a Gen Xer, and there's a very good chance you did it as a single parent. And I talked about single moms, but there's a lot of single dads out there too that did it. So I wasn't discounting you. A lot of single dads out there, but single parents. Where the older generations before us, they didn't have that. Their wives weren't forced into the workplace because of economics or just social pressure. And I'll reiterate that I have no problem with women going into the workforce. I'm not a caveman. A woman should go into the workforce of her own free will because that's what she wants to do, not because she doesn't want people making fun of her or thinking she's lazy or whatever, because she wants to stay home with her kids. Because depending on your situation, your values, your whatever other thing we can think of, depending on those things, either answer could be correct. Stay home, go to work. If you get more value out of your life and you're happier, or you just have to pay the bills, you should go to work. If you don't have to go to work, if you're financially secure enough, you don't have to go to work, and you want to stay home and raise your kids and teach them good values, then you should. And you shouldn't be ashamed for it or ashamed of it. And I see a lot of these like double standards towards women. In the 80s, we weren't making this stuff up. We were kids partying. It was the older generations making this crap up that made Gen X women think that they had to go into the workforce. It wasn't us. So we did the best we could in a volatile, quickly changing society that was rocketing toward this unknown internet future while going to work full time. A lot of us with no help, and a lot of single parents who were working and needed some financial help from the government couldn't get it because their their income was $5 over the limit. They made $5 too much, so they couldn't get financial help from the government. They were denied. There are a lot of people out there like that and just had to struggle on. And then you wonder why Gen X is callous and doesn't care and whatever you want to, whether other label you want to slap on us, because we know no matter how hard it gets, we're going to survive. We're going to truck through it. We're going to keep the grind. We're going to keep on going. We're going to stay alive. And nobody taught us this. We learned it through life. And I would argue that our generation are one of the best parents in history, because when you look at it with all those factors included in, and then we raised a generation of kids right now. Yeah, they ate Tide Pods when they were younger, but now they're looking like their heads are screwed on straight. We taught them some real values. They know what freedom really is. They know it's important. So anybody trying to say that Gen X is the worst parents in the history of whatever, bullshit. I'm calling it now. Bullshit. Go flap your gum somewhere else. We don't care. Whatever. We know the truth. We lived it. I'd like to invite you to support the channel. You can buy me a cup of coffee, and I'll leave the link down in the description. Thanks in advance. I appreciate it very much. And I'll leave you there with that food for thought. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. Comment down below with your thoughts. You know I really appreciate you taking the time to comment. And you should know by now, if you're a subscriber, that I do respond in the comment section personally. So I do appreciate you taking the time. I like visiting with y'all and talking about this stuff with my fellow Gen Xers. Thank you very much. Stay frosty, Gen X. I'll see you on the next one.